Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel tonight. We are witnessing what many believed was impossible for decades. A political earthquake has shaken the Middle East, sending shockwaves far beyond Iran's borders. The Islamic regime that once projected absolute control now stands on the brink of collapse. Power is slipping from the hands of the clerical elite. The streets are boiling with rage, and a dramatic new figure has stepped into the center of history. The Crown Prince, long living in exile and dismissed by the regime as irrelevant, is now being spoken of as the man taking control as the era of Ayatollah Khamenei faces its darkest hour. For years, the Islamic Republic portrayed itself as unbreakable. It claimed divine legitimacy, revolutionary purity, and absolute loyalty from its security forces. But history has a way of exposing illusions. What we are seeing now is not a sudden event. This collapse has been building slowly, layer by layer, protest by protest, sanction by sanction, lie by lie, and now the pressure has reached a breaking point. Let us take you back to how this moment began to take shape. For decades, Iran's people lived under strict ideological rule. Personal freedoms were crushed in the name of religion. Dissent was labeled treason. Elections were carefully managed. Media was tightly controlled. The regime survived not because it was loved, but because it was feared. But fear, as history shows, has an expiration date. Economic hardship became the silent enemy of the regime. Inflation soared. The national currency collapsed. Young people with degrees found no jobs, no future, no hope. Oil wealth failed to reach ordinary citizens, while corruption flourished among elites tied to the Revolutionary Guards and religious foundations. Each year, life became harder, and each year anger grew deeper. Then came the protests. At first, they were small and scattered, workers demanding unpaid wages, teachers asking for dignity, pensioners crying out for survival. The regime responded with arrests, intimidation, and bullets. But instead of silencing the people, repression only fueled the fire. The protests became louder, bolder, and more political. Chants that once carefully avoided the supreme leader's name now directly targeted him. Death to the dictator echoed across cities. Images of Khamenei were torn down, burned, and trampled. For the first time, the aura of untouchability around the supreme leader was shattered in public view. Women emerged at the forefront of resistance. Their defiance became the symbol of a nation's rebellion. By removing the compulsory hijab in public, they challenged the ideological foundation of the Islamic Republic itself. This was not just about dress codes. This was about control, identity, and freedom. The regime understood the danger immediately. A system built on enforcing obedience through religious authority cannot survive when women openly defy it in the streets. The response was brutal. Security forces cracked down harder than ever. Live ammunition, mass arrests, internet blackouts, and secret executions became routine. But something had changed. The fear was gone. Mothers marched beside daughters. Fathers stood with sons. Even some clerics quietly expressed doubts. The wall of silence was breaking from the inside. Meanwhile, cracks appeared within the power structure. Reports began to surface of disagreements among senior officials. Rival factions blamed each other for failures. The Revolutionary Guards, once seen as the ultimate pillar of the regime, were stretched thin. Tasked with suppressing protests at home while managing conflicts abroad, their authority began to weaken. At the same time, Iran's foreign adventures were becoming liabilities rather than sources of pride. Billions spent on proxy wars in the region could no longer be justified to a population struggling to afford bread. The slogan, "Not Gaza, not Lebanon, my life for Iran," captured the shift in public mood. People no longer accepted sacrifice for ideological dreams. As the regime weakened, an old name resurfaced in a powerful new way. The Crown Prince, Reza Pahlavi, son of Iran's last Shah, had spent decades in exile. For years, state media mocked him as irrelevant, disconnected, and powerless. But while the regime underestimated him, many Iranians never forgot him. Unlike the clerical elite, the crown prince spoke the language of unity rather than ideology. He avoided calls for revenge. He emphasized democracy, human rights, and national reconciliation. Over time, his message began to resonate, especially among younger Iranians who had grown up hearing stories of a different Iran from their parents and grandparents. Social media played a critical role. Despite censorship, videos and messages spread rapidly. The Crown Prince's speeches were shared millions of times. His calls for a secular, democratic Iran gained momentum. What once seemed nostalgic now appeared practical. People were no longer asking whether the Islamic Republic could be reformed. They were asking what would come after it. As protests intensified, something extraordinary happened. Former military officers, diplomats, and even some insiders began to openly criticize the supreme leader. Defections, once unthinkable, started to occur. Reports emerged of security units refusing orders or standing down. The regime's most powerful weapon, absolute loyalty, was slipping away. Behind closed doors, panic set in. Khamenei, aging and increasingly isolated, faced the reality that his authority no longer commanded obedience. His speeches sounded defensive, repetitive, and disconnected from reality. Each address only highlighted how out of touch the leadership had become. Rumors of internal power struggles spread rapidly. Who would succeed Khamenei? Would the Revolutionary Guards take direct control? Could the system survive without its central figure? These questions haunted the regime while energizing the opposition. Then came the turning point. Massive coordinated protests erupted simultaneously across major cities. Tehran, Mashhad, Isfahan, Shiraz, Tabriz, and Ovaz all exploded in defiance. This was not spontaneous. This was organized, strategic, and relentless. Protesters targeted symbols of power, regime offices, and propaganda centers. The response was chaotic. Orders were unclear. Some forces acted brutally, others hesitated. Communication failures paralyzed decision-making. The illusion of control collapsed in real time before the world's eyes. International reactions shifted rapidly. Governments that once cautiously engaged with Tehran began preparing for a post-regime Iran. Diplomatic channels buzzed with urgency. Sanctions that once targeted behavior now aimed to pressure an exit. The message was clear. The era of tolerance was over. In this moment of chaos, the Crown Prince stepped forward decisively. In a historic address, he called for calm, unity, and a peaceful transition. He urged security forces to stand with the people, not against them. He promised accountability through law, not vengeance through violence. This message struck a powerful chord. Within hours, crowds began chanting his name alongside calls for freedom. Iranian flags without ideological symbols flooded the streets. The protest movement transformed into a national uprising with a clear political vision. Behind the scenes, negotiations reportedly began. Senior figures sought guarantees for their safety. Military leaders weighed their options. The cost of clinging to a collapsing regime was becoming too high. Power, once concentrated in the supreme leader's hands, was slipping away rapidly. As the regime's grip weakened, symbolic moments captured the historic shift. State media went silent for hours. Official websites crashed. Government buildings were abandoned. In some areas, local councils declared independence from central authority. The streets told the real story. Millions marched not in fear, but in hope. Tears of grief mixed with smiles of disbelief. A nation that had been silenced for generations found its voice at last. The collapse of the Islamic regime is not just a political event. It is a psychological liberation. For decades, Iranians were told that this system was permanent, divinely ordained, and unchangeable. Tonight, that myth lies in ruins, but this moment is also fragile. History warns us that revolutions can fail as easily as they succeed. The path forward will be complex and dangerous. Power vacuums invite chaos. Old grudges threaten unity. External forces may seek influence. This is why the role of leadership matters now more than ever. The Crown Prince's emphasis on national reconciliation, institutional rebuilding, and democratic transition offers a framework that many see as Iran's best chance to avoid civil war or dictatorship under a different name. The streets erupt not just against Khamenei, but against an entire system of repression. Statues fall, slogans change, and the narrative shifts from resistance to rebirth. Iran stands at a crossroads between its painful past and an uncertain but hopeful future. For the region, this moment could redefine everything. A free Iran would reshape Middle Eastern politics, alter global energy markets, and challenge extremist ideologies. Allies and adversaries alike are watching closely. For the Iranian people, this is about dignity, about choosing their leaders, about speaking without fear, about living normal lives after decades of abnormal control. As the dust settles, one thing is undeniable. The Islamic regime that ruled through fear is collapsing under the weight of its own failures. The streets belong to the people, and history, once again, is being written not by rulers in palaces, but by ordinary men and women who refuse to stay silent. This story is still unfolding. The coming days will be decisive, but tonight the balance of power has shifted. The era of Khamenei is ending. A new chapter for Iran has begun. Stay with us on this channel as we continue to bring you deep analysis, real-time updates, and the untold stories behind one of the most significant political transformations of our time. If you found this video informative, make sure to like, share, and subscribe because history is moving fast and you won't want to miss what comes next.